basically Colibria makes a set of servers, a SIP-IM server, a presence server and a network address book, and we use the IMS as plumbing, if you like, that allows us to understand if a user is secure, if a user is actually allowed to access the service. So we really sit as services on top of the IMS layer. Yeah, applications and ways that the user can communicate. So for example, in the Rich Communication Suite, the RCS, which is a set of services that sit on top of IMS, we supply social presence, the ability to see whether a user's available, the ability for users to actually shout out that they want to communicate with people, presence profile, presence pictures, things like that. We provide the instant messaging for that solution so that people can actually chat. The idea in RCS is that you have SMS, but you also have a chat service that you can use alongside SMS, so they're two separate services that are provided there. Yeah, the handset is the critical component, really. I mean, from a server perspective, the RCS really takes standards that are already in existence and packages them together and says this is how we're going to deliver services using these existing standards. On the client side, we don't develop clients for RCS, so that would be delivered on board by a Nokia, a Sony Ericsson, etc. And it's probably the piece that's going to take the longest time to deliver. That's probably the component that will be the defining part of when services can come in. There are prototypes around now. Most operators that are looking at being leading operators are probably end of the year, first half of next, when they're going to be doing market trials and initial launches. That will probably be with a few handsets, but again, it's Nokia and Sony Ericsson, etc., that would define how many handsets are available. Yeah, it is. We're kind of dependent on that aspect, and we work with a lot of third-party clients as well, so that if people choose to download clients rather than use an on-board client with a Nokia, for example, they can download with an Ecrio or with a Movial, etc. But fundamentally, I think most operators have decided that downloadable clients for RCS is not going to be the mass market offer. It will require, complete integration with the handset at launch. Yeah. So, I mean, being honest about it, IMS is a vehicle to deliver services, and it depends on what services you define as to, how you use the IMS. But for VoIP in particular, you don't actually need an IMS infrastructure to deliver VoIP. You can do that just with a soft switch, and that works perfectly well. If you move VoIP onto a mobile infrastructure, which is probably a few years out, then you need IMS. But that's not really where people's thoughts are. They're thinking more about IP-centrics with IMS, things like that. I think the problem has been with IMS up to now. The services that have been defined haven't been terribly ambitious up to now. You can do VoIP on IMS, you can do VoIP in another way, so there's no sort of critical business case to roll out the IMS infrastructure. I think that's changing with things like Rich Communication Suite, because that's a complete suite of services that need IMS to actually be successful. You tend to find with discrete services like VoIP, like push-to-talk, they don't actually quite carry the business case through to deploy an IMS network. There's a number of things, really. I mean, as I said, the RCS is a nice packaging of services. I mean, and it comes with terminal, so it's actually a lot easier to sell to the user. Things like social network integration with VoIP, with messaging, can be quite compelling, because the operators then have, they keep the user on board within their portal or within their mobile application. So I think combinations of web applications, of social network applications, and of VoIP and messaging are where it's at, and that's probably what's going to carry IMS through. I think there's a number of routes to market for this stuff. The one thing we're noticing, I mean, we make a product called the Social Network Gateway, which frankly does little more than actually push down social network updates to a mobile client. But once you've developed that, you can actually start to see that you actually understand for each user what social networks they belong to, and you also understand which messaging networks they belong to, and you can start to build a community of communities, and you can start to build or recommend to the user, you should join this community because a lot of your friends are on this community. So we see a kind of community centre, if you like, as a way that the operator can add value across communities, and that's something that we're working very heavily.
That would mean combining those already established communities with the operator.
Competing with them. Well, I think providing access initially, and then starting to add value. Chat rooms that are associated with the social network, for example, combining an understanding of a network address book and who's in the network address book with which social communities they offer or which social communities they belong to. So I think things like that are the route forward and allows the operator to actually own some value. But the initial step is actually to provide the access to the social networks so that you have the information. There are other routes to market that the operators are taking. Some people are out in the market building brand so that their social network access as an aggregator, they then sell their brand to the operator, and the operator can then sell a brand basically. But that may be a transient solution, to be honest. Well, if we're talking in 3 years' time and we're still saying what's the story for IMS, then we've wasted our time and we should close it down.
Do you think LTE is going to help propel IMS, for example?
Yeah, I mean they would help with things like VoIP services, for example. But I think there is enough on the plate at the moment that could make IMS successful and could allow the operators to combine services, which is ultimately where it needs to be. But if things like RCS languish and don't get rolled out for a year, then I personally think it's too late, and I think we'll see other technologies start to emerge and take over the role. I don't know, but the IMS infrastructure, as I said, is very good at validating users, providing secure access. But if it's so heavy that the business case can't be carried for services, then people will lighten up the technology so that they can get other kind of technologies in that are cheaper and do make a business case work. So I think the time is right now for things like RCS, but it's the next 12 months that we need to deploy.